Okay, so we're going to take a look at a fairly recent game to come out from Compass Games, the God Kings. Earlier this year, I got my copy from a pre-order. This is kind of what it looks like. This is not all the pieces. This is the setup for the campaign game. I haven't completed the setup yet, but you've got your Egyptians, Mitami, Hatti, who are the Hittites, and they seem to make a sharp distinction that they should be called Hatti in this, and Kassite, I guess Babylonians down here. The game holds between 2 and 4 players. It got some additionals though, which kind of confused me at first. There's going to be some Assyrians, and they have their own player mat. They're never going to be, well, the game doesn't hold a 5th player. Essentially what happens is the Mitami, I believe, disappear, and they are the power at this point. At least at the beginning of the game, they're seen as kind of the more major of the 4 powers. And the Assyrians come back onto the scene. Some of the countries, in particular, your Hittites and Assyrians, have really fallen quite far by the time the game starts. But they're both going to see a resurgence, presumably. Historically they did. And the Mitami, who I never had heard about before this, disappear, more or less collapsing. And then, I don't know, let's take a little look at the system. This is going to be a card-driven game, and you've got your normal sort of ops events cards. I'm going to have to shuffle it all over. Where you have an event, in particular this is an action card, which means it's kind of like a reaction type card in a lot of the games. And the operations value is essentially this number up here. I'm not sure it's better in the middle up here. The game was designed and the rules written as though it was going to be in the left-hand corner, as is pretty standard among these games. But it seems obvious that when they actually got around to doing the artwork on the cards or whatever, they decided to put it in the middle. I can see definite arguments for wanting it over in the corner, because when you're holding a handful of cards, and you hold, I think, 7 in this, well, it's kind of nice to hold them in a more natural fashion than, say, the up-down fashion that this game is going to call for. But whatever. The pieces themselves, a little bit unreadable to my taste. In particular, when I'm looking at these, which are divisions of infantry, I find it very difficult to read what they say on them, especially in kind of questionable light. Some of the numbers, for example, turn 5 on the leaders looked like turn 3 to me in bad lighting. On the other hand, the appearance of the counters, and maybe a little bit about their kind of thinner quality, thinner cardstock or whatever, reminds me of AWE counters, which of course brings a certain fondness to me, and being unreadable kind of fits in with that. They've got some pretty colors, some nice pictures on them, I guess, although the leaders all have the same picture for any given country, as do the other items, for whatever value that is. Now, the last and only other Compass game I have, which is somewhere down here, No Peace Without Spain, I was not thrilled with how light it was. I probably somewhat unfairly treated it because of how light it was, and I kind of tried to promise myself I would approach this a little bit more open. Among other things, damn, we're talking about 1500 BC. This is about, as tucked away in the dark mists of time as you can be. There's not going to be a lot of information that can be expressed in a game like this. And I wouldn't expect it to be able to go into sort of an operational depth that maybe I was hoping for in No Peace Without Spain. That's one side of it. To tell you the truth, though, looking at the rules, this feels a little heavier. It feels a little bit less like a very light treatment. And that pleases me a little bit because I honestly expected this to be the lighter game. I was kind of afraid, oh my God, if they did No Peace Without Spain for Spanish Succession, what are they going to do for this? Well, they certainly didn't seem to go any lighter with this. This seems like about the same kind of treatment, maybe a little bit more in depth. Let's take a look at what the rules are like. So each player has one of these player mats, and they're able to keep track of points on these general point tracks, which have kind of a strange combination. You're going to have an Arabic numeral counting system with times 10, times 1, etc., but with digits and symbolism from some culture of that era, I'm assuming. Some kind of numbering system from some Near Eastern society, and I'm not familiar with it, but it strikes me a little odd just with the wait a minute, why am I using tens digits here with this? Shouldn't I be doing this in base 12? I don't know. Okay. You have these divisional units, which are 3 infantry units of the same value, and we'll get to the significance of that. You got some chariot units, which are a little more powerful and faster, but a bit weaker. You have this counter, which I'm not sure what it is to represent. I think it's a control marker for when a country is neutral so that another country can hold it. That's not going to be important in this game, but it would be important if some of the players weren't in the scenario. But with a 4-player Grand Campaign scenario, every country is commanded by a player, every major country. There's some minors down here, which consist of some revolts and some, I think Amaru is a revolt actually, and some barbarian raiders. What else do we have here? Now the time scale is like 25 years per turn, so it's quite a large scale there. We have a space to indicate if you're allowed to keep a card for an extra turn. When you have a successor, you might have multiple leaders. So let's take a look at the Egyptians here. They start off with Hatshepsut or whatever, and they get Thutmose as a possible successor. So let's try to pronounce this right. Hatshepsut. I'll be on the board at the beginning of the scenario, but Thutmose, who is quite powerful, could come in as a successor on any given round. And each turn is going to be broken into 5 rounds, which are going to be marked off here. You got different markings on the map. Everything's a city, but not these. These are barbarian spaces. The little squared cities are fortified, and this is not absolutely clear from anything like here or the description in the rules, and the rules have some issues. This looks like a level 1 or a level 2 walled city, and then we have a level 3 walled city, which looks somewhat similar. There's one with more wall structures in it. And everything you control is going to have a little control marker, even if it's in your home territory, but walled cities can hold a garrison, in which case they have to actually be besieged. If they don't have a garrison, they can be just controlled like unwalled cities can. Okay. Base sequence of play, everybody gets a handful of cards, 7 cards each. In general, 6 if they've already got a card that they wanted to hold from last turn. And then they get some reinforcements, and the reinforcements are going to be See, some of them just recover. If you lose your base infantry units, they just recover automatically to you. Half strength ones go up to full strength. Dead ones come back on the board as half strength. The other units, though, chariots and mercenaries, you have to buy anew each turn. And what you do is you spend tribute points and you spend wood. You have to spend both for chariots. Just tribute will get you mercenaries. And we have mercenaries over here, which are not terribly effective compared to the other troops. Okay. Neutrals take an automatic replacement valuing. And then on the 6th turn of the game, we have this switch from the Mitanni over to the Assyrian player. And they'll just switch counters and their control sheet as well. Alright. And obviously, if you're at all familiar with my videos, and some of you may not be, this is an absolute first look at the game. I've looked at the rules a few times, have some familiarity, and would be ready to dive in and play, but I've not played it yet. And that's just the way I do things. I want to capture the play, and then I go and hit a review of it later. This is just an introduction, obviously. Okay. And I do these rules more for myself, because speaking them aloud helps me understand what's going on. And if you can gain anything from them, that's great. Alright. So then each player in a turn ordering which is based, oh no, let's take a look. We forgot the strategy phase. Okay, so the strategy phase, 5 rounds. Yeah. Okay. So each player is going to have a turn that's based on, I believe, the lowest victory points has first option where he wants to go in the initiative order. So whoever's kind of losing the game has the option to go early or late in the turn or whatever. Once everybody's settled there, then you have to make a roll to see if your successor comes in if you have one. So for example, in this situation, well, there's going to be one Egyptian leader. The other one, Thutmose, who's much, much better, has to roll, and I think it's equal to or under the round number. So as the turn goes on, it becomes more and more likely for the younger leader to take the place. And you'll be getting victory points as you go using this 4 sets of markers here, one for tribute and one for wood. One for your current turn's victory points, and then a total victory points that after the current turn, you just keep this running total on. It's kind of nice to have them all on tracks. Maybe better than on paper. I don't know. I have mixed feelings. Sometimes paper is nice because you get a total that's readable. You can see the changes in it nicer. Okay. And then you're going to play your strategy card, your ops event card, just as you would in any other CDG style game. And let's see. Yeah, so it's going to be each round, each player gets their sequence, and then we go back. No big shock there, and I know this is taking a lot. Then we go to this neutral nations period, where each of the neutral countries has... So the neutral countries have a chance to be activated by the players within their rounds using their activity cards. But if you don't use a card to activate a neutral, the neutrals get their own, whether you do or not, the neutrals get their own free draw of a card and some action. Now, we have less neutrals here because all the players are actually assigned to the player empires, but we do have these barbarians and revolts that are treated kind of like neutrals. Okay. So turn order and initiative is going to be judged by, whoever scored the least number of victory points during the current turn has the initiative. This is in step 4 of the victory phase. Okay, so, yeah, I didn't get to this. The victory phase, okay. So, you're going to count the victory points that you collect in a particular turn, see if somebody won the game automatically off those victory points, and then you adjust the running total. And finally, well, enemy political control markers are removed from your home area for whatever that matters. Now, during that phase is when the turn order is determined, and that's when, indeed, whoever got the least in the current turn, it's not your overall running victory points, it's how poorly you're doing at the moment that decides what kind of advantage you have. So you might want to kind of balance that, and you might do poorly on a turn in order to get a choice for the next turn. I don't know. And then do really, really well so that you can go poorly all the time from then on and still win or something. I don't know. Okay, reinforcements. These are, as I said, the regular warriors are going to just increase on their own. Other units, you're going to spend tribune and wood points. Well, when did you get those tribune and wood points? You get them just before this. And it looks to me like you kind of have to spend them at the moment. So it doesn't make a lot of sense that you have a track for these. Although with trading, etc., you can accumulate, you can gain an additional point or points during the turn. Still, there's a lot of, there's a few extra counters there that I'm not sure really needed to be assigned. And the game comes with a pile of blanks, which I'm probably going to use for something else. Got this idea of converting my EU game up closer to EU 8, in terms of the counters at least. Okay, and these counters will do very well for that, if I can just get the colors right. Okay. If necessary, when your king changes, so sometimes a new king comes in at the beginning of a turn. So here, oh Jesus, that may be for me. I've got to hold. Well, no bonus new games for me. All right, let's see. We were on reinforcements. So yeah, it's possible that a king starts the turn. So for example, let's see. I'm trying to see one. Here we have Amenhotep IV, who wouldn't come in as a successor in Amenhotep III's turns. He would come in here, and he would just start the turn there. Successors are always marked on the second line there, I guess. Anyway, it's possible you could just have a new king show up at this point. And then you get your units on the board, and you can put them, it looks like, anywhere that you can trace back to your home country. Okay. Divisions get a combat bonus if they're all together. So if all the named units of a division, and this is one of the complaints I have, these guys are really hard to tell apart, and they got these little names. A little colored band or something would help tremendously here. It's not there. Sad decision. A place where a design decision that's pretty common among war games, at least, could have been made here, and it wasn't. Now, when some of your divisions start the game on the board and available, but some of them don't. So, for example, these two Egyptian divisions don't start the game. They come in during play, and one of them comes in on turn 2, but some of them come in due to the play of cards. There's military reform or army reform cards, which allow you to bring a new division into play. One country in particular, the Hatti, have the requirement that they have to own certain areas in order to, I think it's these two. This one definitely, Patasi, yeah, Walusa. These two areas, they have to own one of them and commit the unit, the division that's named after it, to come in. And then that becomes part of their home territory. Their home territory actually grows. Most of the countries have just one area of home territory. Well, all of them do, except for that. Okay. So there's a bunch of different things you can do with your strategy cards, as with most of these games. One is you can activate a general, and as normal, generals have, and there's also these warlords, not just your royal generals. Generals have sort of a strategy rating, and then they have a military value. And you have to play a card at least as big as their strategy rating. So again, like in a lot of these CDGs, a low number for strategy is good, but you want a high tactical or battle rating. You can activate a general who has an army with at least 3 combat units to do a siege if he's in the location. And that doesn't require an operations card to match the general. It just requires any ops card. You can do as you can in a lot of these games, throw down a bunch of political control markers using your ops value. And you use the number of points from the ops value. You can raise troops. You can grab face-up mercenaries equal to the ops number on the card to join with a general. And you can't do this when you're besieged. You can use one of your cards, and this is outside the normal strategy card play, to modify the succession die roll. And I think you can do this in either direction. You can play a 3 ops card in order to activate a neutral general, and then you can play it as though it's one of your own folks. And you can play a 1 or... Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go to the next one here. You can convert, with a 1 or 2 ops card, a PC marker, political control marker, that's inside a walled city like this, into a garrison, making it a city that'll have to be besieged. And if you play a 3 ops card, you can do that to 2 cities. You can play a 1 or 2 ops card to grab yourself a wood and a tribute point that you'll use in your next reinforcements phase. And you can play a 3 ops card to get 2 of each. The cards also have events on them, which you can play as the event instead. Some of the cards will be removed from play when they're used. Let's look at stacking. So in order to define a force to move it, a warlord can command 5 units. A king can command 10 units plus up to both the warlords. See, if you have a king involved leading your forces, you can have quite a hefty amount of troops under him moving at once. Movement includes some rules for overrunning, which is 10-to-1 odds, essentially. There's reaction opportunities. Like in a lot of these games, if somebody's moving into a space, you can try to intercept them. And you use, let's see. I use this, I guess. Select the general. I don't know. Yeah, no, that isn't it. Well, you're going to roll a die. Just looking for where it defines it. These rules are a little iffy. No big shock, it's a CDG and they seem to specialize in poorly written rules. But these actually get worse as you go on. For one thing, and this has nothing to do with the writing, they seem to have left a staple out. I don't know if that's a common instance here or just a binding strangeness on mine. But as you get to the very end of the rules, I started noticing more inconsistencies and straight out, rules that are just wrong. As though somebody got through sort of reviewing the rules to maybe the first, 16 pages or so, and then they didn't have time and they had to rush it to the printers at once, and it didn't go through maybe that final review on the last few pages. There are some definite issues there, and strangely, nobody threw an errata sheet in. You'd think while it went to the printers they could still have maybe sent it through that final bit of review and put the errata in. The beginning of the rules seemed pretty good in terms of not having real issues from what I noticed, although they don't sink in terribly well, which to me probably means that I'm going to have trouble coming back to them. They're not formatted in a good way. They're this, I mean, it's not the worst that it could be. It's not like, a Fantasy Flight type game, but there's sort of, I don't know, a lack of standard discipline across the rules. In some cases, you have numbering that goes into some detail, like here, but it's not on a kind of per paragraph idea. It's on broader concepts, and usually rules fall apart when that happens. Anyway, I cannot find... here we go. Here's the procedure. Well, so all reactions kind of work the same way. You're making a roll to get greater than your battle rating. No, under your battle, not greater than your battle rating. Okay, and you take some modifiers based on situations. So, for example, in the interception, the political control of the area can affect it, number of chariot units affected, and whether you're fully chariot based. I'm going to load this one up, combine it with the next one. And withdrawal from combat is handled in much the same way, where there's going to be, well, like with interception, a commander has to define a force and actually move it. You can't retreat even without a commander able to command the entire force that's retreating. But you're allowed to try to avoid battle, and again, you roll a die against the whatever battle rating or whatever, and you have pretty much the same kind of modifiers. The only different one is if you're a lone general trying to not get overrun by the troops, you get an additional you get a bonus from that. And let's see, pursuit. If the battle is avoided by the defending player, the attacker can make a roll to continue moving. This doesn't actually have to be a pursuit. They can move somewhere else as well. If you're in a walled city, you have the right to just withdraw into that city if you wish, without having to withdraw, without having to make a roll for withdrawal. Okay, so once you actually get into a battle situation, what you're going to be doing here, well, this is a little interesting. The first thing that you do is the person with the most chariots has the option to make a chariot charge. And the way that's going to be handled is first they have to make a roll less than or equal to the difference between the battle ratings of the commanding generals. And there's modifiers based on the number of chariots you have. Now, it's possible that you have no chance of succeeding. And if you fail or choose not to roll or whatever, the other player has their own chance to do it based on the same numbers. I'm not sure that they're entirely reflexive, but they seem very close to being so. So it seems to me that really only one person would often have the chance. I haven't looked at the modifier completely. For example, yeah, it's multiples of chariots gives you bonuses. Yeah, a good leader. A good leader without who has less chariots would still have a chance to do it, even if someone who had a lesser leader with lots and lots of chariots failed. I guess that's the difference. So the way, and there's also a 1 will always succeed, a 6 will always fail. So even if you had no chance mathematically, you could still get it. Okay. So if the charge succeeds, you're going to roll on the battle table here compared to the number of strength points of chariots only that you have. And that'll determine how many casualties you're going to do, there's no modifiers to this, to your opponent. And those losses are taken immediately, I guess. And then you go to the main battle. And let's touch on the battle table to understand this is very much like Empires in Arms, for example, for how it's going to handle the battles. Or I think Warlords, China in Disarray uses a similar system. Basically, you cross-reference the strength to a die roll and see how much, and Europa Universalis, which is derivative of Empires in Arms, does it as well. And you determine how many points of damage you do to your opponent. Now, in most of those other games, those are just strength points lost. Here, they're damage points lost. And like in a lot of these modern games, I don't know why this mechanism has become so popular. It's a little unfamiliar to me to begin with, although I'm getting kind of used to it. But it can create some weird situations. So there's two elements to this. One is the mechanism that I'm alluding to here, which is whatever losses you take, you have to take as close to that as possible without exceeding it. Now with this, they start to come up with exceptions to that even, to make it even more painful. But in addition to that kind of a little bit wanky solution that I've been seeing in a lot of games recently, there's also this central number, which is how many hits you take to take a step loss. Okay? So, in order to take a hit on this infantry, you spend 3 casualty points from the battle table. Now, you must spend as many casualty points as you can, in general, without exceeding the battle result. So if you got a battle result of 5, and all you had were these 2, you would only take 1 step loss, because this is still a 3 here. I'm not sure I understand what you get out of that, but people seem to have grown very fond of that kind of technique to taking losses recently. So now here's the little twist to it that makes it a little bit worse or different from every other system like that, other than the number in the middle, as opposed to, say, strength points being determined, which is kind of cool. I like the number in the middle. Here's why. You have infantry that are pretty straight up standard. The mercenaries are also the same. Their strength is the equivalent of what their casualty rating is. Now, once they flip over, it takes more to finish them off. But you've got these chariots, which are more powerful on attack, or do more damage, potentially, but they're more fragile. And I really like that means of representing them. So I think giving a defensive number that is how many hits you take, in addition to the offensive fighting capability on the field, I think that's a nice little trade-off there at a very simple level. Okay, but if you attempted a cavalry, a chariot charge, whether you succeeded or not, if you rolled to attempt one, then half the losses that you take, rounded down, will be chariot units. And here's where things get kind of wanky again, is this ends up being possible to exceed the total steps, not for the chariot, but to exceed the total amount of losses you take, so that you can actually resolve that. And that's going to be a little twisted, and I think that it wasn't worded terribly well. I know I did a horrible job of it, and I have had a better understanding from reading the rules. But basically, there's something a little weird there with how you're going to have to figure it. And it may take some discussion to figure out how you want to handle that. Okay. So, you do a round of combat, you roll some dice, and the guy who took the most losses loses. And they're going to have to retreat. And retreats in this are to the nearest kind of friendly area, which means you can retreat through enemy territory. You just take a penalty for doing so. And the penalty there is it's going to be step losses for PC markers and for enemy units, etc. And you see this kind of effect in other games, but it seems fairly light here, where it's only a step loss per penalty situation. Now sieges, damn, I don't remember these at all. So I remember how you activate for them. You just need a card, and you need to be there with a leader. But when you actually resolve it, what do? You calculate a siege resolution die roll modifier. This is going to be based on the action cards, any siege continued markers, and the walled city's printed siege modifier. Gosh. Well, the siege modifier is -1 for the second wall and -2 for the third wall, I guess. Alright. I think that's what they mean by the printed one. And then you consult the siege table for results. So you roll a die, and oh look, you want to get a high number, a 4 or higher, and then the city will surrender. If it doesn't surrender, I think you get a siege continued marker, which increases the chances of the next siege taking it over. Natural rolls, a 6 is always successful, a 1's always unsuccessful. Useful stuff to remember. By the way, component-wise, it gives you these nice little dice. I like these guys. Rounded, pretty little dice. Kind of reminds me of stuff the gamers used to, or not the gamers, who the hell used to put them in there? I don't know. Anyway, they very pleasing dice to me that I would use with the gamers games. They actually put kind of questionable dice in, I think. Alright, let's see what else we got here. Political control. You can place them through cards. You can also place them by spending movement points from your armies. And I think if you win battles, you get them as well. All very standard stuff for these CDGs. The point-to-point systems have kind of triangulated on some ideas. And this one doesn't stray far from that at all. But where it does get kind of interesting is here with the successors rules. And we already talked about that very briefly. But that is one of the kind of cool things about it, is that you're worrying about, you know, who's coming in when. This becomes something sort of like, I'd say, Warrior Knights, where there's a decent amount of luck, but you have more control here because you can use cards to modify your chances of gaining or losing a leader. And there's also the God King card, which allows you to guarantee a success, but the opponents have cards that they can play against you. Then moving on to here. Well, diplomacy between players. It's a 4-player game. It's all open. Mostly, diplomacy is just, you can cut the deals you like within the base rules of the game. There's, you know, not a lot of formal, I'm allied with you, I can't attack you. There's none of that. But there are some special things that can happen during the reinforcement phase. You can give your own spaces to another player if they're adjacent to them. You can exchange tribune and wood points with one another. And you can also give one card to one other player. So, in addition to whatever informal agreements you can make, there are a few things within the rules that allow you to associate with other people. Now, through the play of the game, you can play your cards to help one another however you like, and obviously you can choose to attack or not attack where you want to, stuff like that. The other is the neutral countries, though. And we've already touched on this idea, where the player can use one of his own 3-point ops cards to activate a neutral country, and one of their leaders, and use it. Well, there aren't going to be any neutrals except for the barbarians and the revolts, so there's no big powers you can pull into play. But whether or not you do that, at the end of the turn, the neutrals get their own little minor turns where they get to draw a card and somebody gets to control them. And the control there is determined. How do you get the marker? You may not activate a neutral general on your impulse if you did it. Yeah, you can't do it 2 turns in a row. Who gets the nation's control marker? I don't know how you get one of them. I assume through card play, actually, because if no one has it, the person with the least victory points gets it. Oh wait, once a player controls a neutral nation, another player gains control. You gain control when you activate it. So if you play your 3-point card to activate a nation, it's yours until somebody else triggers it in. Okay. And they get their own reinforcement points. Barbarian invasions and revolts work the same as neutral player countries with a few minor changes that we're not going to worry too much about here. But they don't start the game on the board. They have to come in via the cards. Now, victory for the game. Okay. So provinces have their own victory points listed. They have a victory point value to the left and a tribune value, which is how much money they get, to the right. How do you get wood? Good question. In order to fully control the area, you have to have a number of spaces marked with the little dots, as well as all the walled cities. If you do, you can get the victory points for the area. Now, the victory points you get, you're going to lose additional points if you're going to lose some points if someone has taken territories in your home country areas. If that's happened, you lose 2 points per. And here's where we get to one of these cute places. Here's how they word it. Each player loses 2 victory points for each space of his home country that he does not control, unless his home country is not conquered. If a player's home country is conquered, wait, what? Now, obviously, this is written as a dichotomy. The question is there one too many not in here, or is there one missing from here? I've decided that it's unless his home country is conquered. If it is conquered, he doesn't control the majority of its spaces. The player does not receive the victory points of his home country. Good enough. And he gets only half any other victory points he's entitled to. So that's a pretty major effect if you lose control of your home country. Someone else doesn't have to have it. Now, after you add together the victory points that everybody's getting, if anybody's getting at least 20 at the end of the turn, there's a chance, it's not guaranteed, that there's a sudden death victory. And basically, that's going to happen unless there are ties. If 2 people are tied with that, and here we come to another one of those fun little rule ambiguities. After all on this one page, right? It's like they forgot to read this one. After calculating the current turn victory point for all players, if any player let's see. The winner is the player with the highest total. Oh, okay, yeah. If 2 or more players are shown to have scored 20 victory points in that turn, the winner is the player with the highest number of total victory points. Similarly, in the case of the tie, the winner is the player with the greatest total number of victory points. It's the same value. So one of them is going to be the highest for the turn, and one is the highest total. And I'm not sure which one is which. I'm not sure it matters. I'm going to play it as, because the 20 is the important thing, making it to the top, making the most in one turn is kind of the important thing. That's showing you're really dominating things for a short while. I'm going to say the guy who dominates them the more on the current situation, i.e. they have the larger value of points gained in this current turn, will win, at least for my playthrough. May not be what they intended, but it seems to catch the spirit correctly. Okay. And you can get victory points during battles, as long as there's at least 6 units in the enemy. You get an additional point if you defeat barbarians. Cards could give points. And you get the provincial values. So it's not just your board position. There are other factors, how well you did in battle, etc., that could give you that automatic victory. Remember, your order of play is determined by your your current turn victory points, and then those get added to your total victory points. So there's a few effects to keeping track of the victory points per turn. One person could win with a very good turn, even though they've been doing poorly all game, conceivably. And we'll see what kind of happens there. The rules for displacement, basically that's a situation when a general is unable to stay on the board. Say his troops get wiped out in a combat situation, or he's sitting alone and he gets walked on by an enemy troop. He doesn't just get destroyed, he gets kind of dropped off at home, and it doesn't really require a lot more explanation than that. Then, in addition to your rule book, you also have a playbook, and the playbook comes with scenarios that seem very sketchy. For example, when I looked at the campaign game scenario, which is really tiny, I'm wondering, wow, what's up with the neutral countries like Samaria? Why aren't they in there? Well, I looked at this without reading the rules as part of the problem here. But you know, there's discussion of place neutral nations' armies. What? Do I do them? Once you read the rules and get familiar, it's pretty obvious. Those are not going to start the game on the board with in any of these scenarios. Then they give this huge example of play, which of course I didn't bother reading. I'm just not interested in that. An explanation of all the cards, which is kind of enjoyable if, well, no, it's not really. So this is, you know, really a manifest giving you specific rules on all the cards. And in a way, if you have to provide this, and I understand why you have to, there's kind of a, okay, I'm not sure card-driven makes sense anymore, right? If the cards don't make sense on their own. Now, a lot of these don't look like they should really require something, but it is useful to have the manifest of all of these. People who aren't familiar with the game, if they want to have a chance against somebody who is familiar, they probably have to read that and look at it, or else examine all the cards on their own or whatever. And does the manifest give anything of value? It does not give the number of cards of each type necessarily, but it looks like maybe there's only 110 cards total, so maybe there's just one of each. So like 109 and 110, it tells you there's 2 of that type. So that's sufficient. And then some rather sparse historical notes, which is a pity. I want historical notes on something like this just because I know very little about it. Of course, I might go and investigate further afterwards, and maybe there's stuff on the cards, although I doubt it too much. But what seems to be missing is the designer notes. And I really like designer notes, and they just don't seem to be here. Some reproduction of some charts, etc. Of course, in today's day of the interwebs, designer's notes may be less necessary. People who are interested in that can get them online, perhaps. But for me, it's part of my experience with a game. I like to open it up and read those and just add that to my pleasure. Reading online, I get no pleasure out of that. Anyway, personal tastes there, no question about it. I'm going to finish the setup, come back, start the play. I know this hasn't been the cleanest and clearest explanation that even I've managed, but you know, at least you get some idea of maybe how things work a little bit. I think we'll see more as we play, because I haven't really grasped the interactions more than anything else. Everything seems pretty straightforward for a CDG at this point. Gotta see it in play, because so much is hidden in the cards, right? Okay.